I will be doing the scripture reading. It is Luke 11:37 through 41. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not first wash before the meal. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisee, clean the outside of your cup and dish, but the inside is full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not one who made the outside make the inside also? But now as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you."
Thank you, Sam. Quick note, if you are watching online, if you could do us a big favor and like the video, that way it gets moved up the YouTube algorithm and more people can watch it, and we know that people like our videos. Now to this morning. I want you to imagine you are a church leader of some kind. You are an elder, maybe you're a preacher, maybe you're just a minister of some kind. And a very important and influential preacher is coming to visit your town. He's going to do some area-wide meetings. He's going to meet with individual churches. This has all been arranged ahead of time. And in one of these things, every time he teaches and preaches, it is just amazing. And everyone wants to hear more. And everyone wants to talk to this guy. Everyone wants to get to know this guy even better. And lots of people want to spend time with this special person who has come to your town. And he has accepted only one invitation to dinner, and that is an invitation to your house. No one else's house, yours. And you've taken advantage of this. You've invited other area-wide church leaders to come and meet with this preacher because they all want to meet this guy. They all want to talk to this guy and get to know who he is. And when the teacher arrives, you notice he's not wearing any shoes. You notice this, everyone kind of notices this, and it kind of surprises everybody that this important preacher who travels around the country speaking to large crowds is not wearing shoes. And it kind of grosses you out that he's not wearing shoes. But you don't say anything because you're a good host. This important preacher, though, he looks straight at you. And he looks at you and he starts accusing you of being a hypocrite. That you keep your feet looking all nice and clean in your shoes, but on the inside, your feet are actually dirty. They look clean on the outside, but they're actually dirty. And he just starts going on and on and on about this. And then a friend of yours, another church leader in the area, sticks up for you. He's like, whoa, when you say this about my friend, you're saying this about us too. And this important preacher who just came to your town turns on your friend and starts accusing your friend of being a hypocrite and a bad teacher and not teaching well. And you are mortified. This is the most awkward experience you have ever had in your life, that the shoeless visiting preacher is accusing you of hypocrisy and your friend of being a terrible, terrible teacher. Now you can imagine possibly how the Pharisee in this story might be feeling at this time. He was probably expecting an evening where he got to debate with other teachers of the law and other Pharisees with Jesus about some issues that Jesus has brought up over the first 10 chapters of Luke or so. Jesus has a lot of controversial stuff, and he probably wants to know more about that and talk to Jesus about that. And he's invited his friends, his other important religious people, to be a part of this discussion as well, because this is what you do, right? You want to have a big debate, you invite people in. There was no social media to do this over at the time, so you had to do it face-to-face. Probably a better way to do it. But in this Pharisee discovered, like a lot of people will discover throughout Luke and the other Gospels, that Jesus is sometimes a terrible, terrible dinner guest. I have spent a number of years researching, diving in, dissecting the meals that Jesus has. And honestly, sometimes he's great, okay? Sometimes you do not want to have dinner with Jesus. He just goes, what you would think is off the rails, but it's because Jesus' agenda is different than our agenda. Jesus is on a mission. And that is part of what we see in this story that Sam began reading this morning. And this story it starts simple enough. Jesus has been teaching and preaching, which is typically the way some of these stories start. He has specifically been preaching about the lamp of the body, and he's been talking about the sign of Jonah. And you can read those teachings in earlier in chapter 11 of Luke, about what he has been talking about. And at the end of the day, the Pharisee invites Jesus to eat. It's the only invitation that Jesus takes at the town. And while they're all reclining at the table, they notice that Jesus doesn't wash his hands. Now, we are all very aware of hygiene these days, right? It's kind of a thing. We're all very aware of, and there's probably 5 or 6 hand washing stations in the foyer, and there are little pumps at the top of all the stairwells. We're very aware of hygiene, but this isn't what this is about. This is not about simply not having germs on your hands, because Jesus would have had plenty of germs on his hands. He is famous for touching lepers and sick people and poor people and people who would have been dirty and just being dirty himself. But this is about a ceremonial cleaning or a ritual washing that makes you seem to be ceremonially clean. And Jesus, the other interesting thing in this is this guy who notices this, that Jesus doesn't do this, he doesn't say anything out loud, but Jesus knows what he is thinking. This is that kind of nature of who Jesus is. He knows what's in the hearts of men and women, and so he can respond to that rather than waiting for us to say something stupid. And for lack of a better word, Jesus pounces on this Pharisee, because he's got some important things he wants to teach these Pharisees, and then later the teachers of the law, which we will see, but also some stuff for us as well. And we'll get into that as we go along. Because the Pharisees were more worried about the outward appearance of how they looked. And Jesus uses the analogy of a cup. And I have what appears to be, and earlier there was, a clean coffee cup here on the podium. I put the clean one up earlier because I was afraid someone would clean it up. But if you look on the inside, it's not very clean. And if you watch this later, I'll post a picture of it. When I found out I was covering for Mike, I put coffee in a cup and let it sit, because I knew this was next on my agenda. And so it looks nice, right? The coffee cup, if you're sitting in the back or watching online, it looks clean, but what you can't see is that it's not. There's a nice ring around it and some crud at the bottom of it as well. And this is what Jesus is talking about the Pharisees, that they have a self-righteous outside, but the inside is dirty. And after this general attack that Jesus, and I'm calling it an attack because this is what he does. After this general kind of attack that Jesus does against them, he gets more specific with the Pharisees. He's got 3 woes that he is going to pronounce. So if you're following along in your Bible, we're going to pick up in verse 42 of chapter 11. Jesus says, "Woe to you Pharisees, because you give 1/10 of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. Woe to you Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogue and greetings in the marketplace. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves, which men walk over without knowing it." So Jesus starts in the first of these woes. There are 6 woes, so if you're keeping notes, we're going to talk about the first 3 here right now. The Pharisees, like all of the Israelites, were commanded to give 1/10 of all they had every year. 1/10. They had to, and the Pharisees were really good at getting down to the very small garden herbs and making sure that of their dill, their mint, and their rue, they got just 1/10 of what they had, and made sure they contributed just that 1/10 to the Lord. The problem is they actually forgot to love God. They forgot why they were doing the 10th. That looked good on the outside because they got they counted down to the very 10th of everything, but on the inside, they had forgotten to actually love God, who they were giving the 10th to. And they forgot to practice justice as well. The other problem is while they were doing these little details, they forgot to show justice to other human beings. They forgot that part of our offering to the Lord is how we treat each other. Not only are we supposed to love God, but we're supposed to love those around us. And they were getting the tithing right. They were getting those little itty-bitty details right, but they were missing the big picture about loving God and loving each other. Which brings us to the second woe. They wanted to be recognized as righteous and important people that they thought that they were. They thought they were the most righteous and important people and wanted to be recognized for that. So they wanted the most important seats in the synagogue. If you were thinking about our auditorium today, where would you say, raise your hand if you think you're sitting in the most important seat in the auditorium this morning. I think one of the most important seats is that one up there because he's controlling the sound, only for that way. But in my personal opinion, the best seats in the house are these front couple of rows right here, mostly because that's where I sit. But this is where the Pharisees would want to sit so that you could see the backs of their heads and know they were present, know they were here, and be able to say, oh, there's that guy, that Pharisee, that brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so. They're here. And not only did they want that recognition in the worship service, in the synagogue, they wanted it on the streets as well. So when they were passed in the marketplace, if you're at the mall or at the grocery store, they wanted people to recognize you as important. So it wasn't just in a religious setting they wanted people to know that they were important. They wanted to know they were important in kind of an outside and a secular setting as well. But they wanted it not because they were important, they wanted it because they wanted others to know they were important, to see them as important, whether they were or not. It's this outside appearance again. This cup, it's not, so I don't really use this cup. This is just a prop today, but coffee mugs are important to me because I need my coffee in the morning, right? And it's important, so it has to be important. But this cup looks like a good cup. Like the Pharisees look like good people, but they're missing. On the inside, they're not. Which brings us to the third woe, which is their self-righteous religious corruption is not limited to them. It also extends to other people. The dirt on the inside of their cup is being spread. And I talked earlier a little bit about hygiene. You might go into your office. Imagine this cup is sitting at your office in the break room, or maybe it's sitting on your desk. I am famous for leaving cups on my desk and pouring them out later and having a nice ring and having to clean them. Usually I take them home, and I've got like 5 mugs in the dishwasher that are coming back here with me. But the idea is you go to your break room, you grab a mug, you assume it's clean, right? But it's not. It's dirty on the inside. And that corruption spreads from inside the cup to you. So the analogy that Jesus is using is tombs in the ancient world were painted or marked in such a way that you would not walk on them and then become unclean or impure by walking on those graves. And we still have those kind of ideas today. I was always taught to walk around graves, try not to walk on the people, just around them. But the Pharisees are like that. They are defiling people, and people don't know it because they look like they're following somebody who's good on the outside. And like in our original imagining that we were imagining the important preacher coming and we hosting them and the friends standing up for us, a teacher of the law stands up in verse 45. One of the experts in the law answered Jesus, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also." And Jesus replied, "And you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they cannot handle, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. Woe to you, because you build the tombs of the prophets, and it was your forefathers who killed them. So you testify to what you approve of, what your forefathers did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill, others they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the keys of knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. When Jesus left there, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely and besieged him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might have said. So the teacher of the law this expert could have sat this one out, right? They've been like, whoa, these Pharisees they're getting, Jesus is going ham on those guys. I'm going to sit this one out. But instead, he gets up and he gets in the line of fire, for lack of a better word. And Jesus has 3 more woes he's going to pronounce on these experts or teachers of the law. And in many ways, they parallel what the Pharisees have been doing. But they're also slightly different. So the first woe is that teachers of the law are creating heavy burdens on people that they themselves can't even carry. They're creating religious, they're adding things to the instructions that we find in what we would call the Old Testament. And they're piling those extra things on the people who have no access to this themselves, and therefore, but they aren't also helping them carry those burdens along. Their interpretations of scriptures made it more difficult to follow than it should have been. And they're just piling it on the people, but they themselves can't even live up to their own expectations. And then the second woe is the idea of honoring the prophets. The teachers were holding up the prophets as heroes, and they were building tombs in honor to the prophets, but they don't actually honor the prophets with their words. They don't honor the teachings of the prophets by what they do. They're paying them lip service, saying, yes, these prophets were great. Yes, these prophets were wonderful. Yes, they had great and wonderful things to say, but they aren't putting them into practice in their own lives. And therefore, they are guilty of the deaths of those prophets themselves by just paying them lip service. And finally, they're withholding keys of knowledge to those around them. And they're not even using the keys themselves to understand what they're teaching. And this idea needs a little explanation for us. So, most of us, we were told earlier to silence our digital devices, right? And on those devices, we have access to what we would call the Old Testament if you're a first century Israelite, or you could think of as the Bible. With just a few taps of your finger, you're looking at the Bible, reading the Bible, understanding what you can of the Bible. I do this to Mike when he preaches, and I did this to Jonah this morning also. Jonah said the word was falling on his neck, and I was like, oh, that is that word. And so I look at the word, and I've got an app that allows me to do a short little word study. I was like, yes, it is the word falling on neck. And Mike will do this in sermons too. He'll talk about a word is better, this word is better than that word, and I'll track it down and start seeing how this word, what it means in other places and stuff. Because the keys to understanding what the Bible says to us are in our pockets many times. Literally, in our pockets. But as an ancient Israelite, you didn't have access to the Old Testament like that. The Old Testament, what we would call the Old Testament, was kept not necessarily hidden, but kept locked away. And only certain people had access to it, whether they were reading it or they had memorized it, because not everyone could read, and books and scrolls were expensive. And it was sacred knowledge that was kept away. So the teachers of the law have the keys, maybe literally to the lock, but figuratively. They had the keys to that information in the Old Testament, but they weren't allowing people to read it. And they weren't even using the keys themselves to get in and seeing what it was saying to them. And then, as I said, the story ends with the Pharisees and the experts going after Jesus. Jesus becomes their target, and they're trying to look for him to say things that will trip him up. They become opposed to him, which completely makes sense. Because he just caught them in hypocrisy and in not being good teachers, and now they're looking for hypocrisy and bad teachings in Jesus. And this story is a warning to us as well. There's a message for us. Anytime you read about Pharisees, you should stop and ask yourself, what is the message for me? Because we are not necessarily Pharisees, but people would have seen Pharisees on the outside as the good synagogue-going people. And we appear to be the good church-going people. So we have to be aware of the messages to the Pharisees for us as well. So I've got a couple of things. I got 5 things for us this morning. So if you're taking notes, we had 6 woes, and we got 5 points. They're going to be short. The first one is, do the little and big things for the Lord. The Pharisees had focused on getting the little bitty details right, but they neglected the big things like actually loving God, actually showing mercy to poor and justice to people. Loving God and loving people are the big things that go along with the little things as well. And don't just, second is don't seek honor and recognition of people from other people, but seek honor and recognition from the Lord. We talked about this in our Bible class in Acts during our combined Sunday morning 6th through 12th grade class. And there's a story where a man named Barnabas sells some land, and he gives the money to the land to the apostles, and that money is distributed to the poor who need it. Then, immediately following that, there's a story of a couple named Ananias and Sapphira who try to do the same thing. They want to get, Barnabas is his nickname, his real name is Joseph. His nickname is Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. But they also want to get this kind of status of having a cool nickname from the apostles and looking like they're helping the poor. So they sell the land, but they keep some of the money and give it away. And that's a hypocrisy right there. They're seeking honor and recognition from people rather than honor and recognition from the Lord. Right there. They're looking good on the outside, saying, hey, I gave all this money. But on the inside, they're dirty because they're keeping that commitment, that promise from what they made to the Lord. So the third warning to us is, be careful in our attempts to be righteous so we don't lead others astray by neglecting justice, humility, love for God, and trying to look like we've got it all together on the outside. So justice and humility and love for God are important, and we have to have those as the center. This whole life as a follower of Jesus means nothing if we don't love God, love Jesus, and love others. But also that last idea about looking normal on the outside. Every one of us in here has struggles. Every one of us in here has something going on the inside that may not look beautiful. May look like it needs some cleaning or some help. But trying to look perfect on the outside can cause people to not be followers of Jesus because they'll see that they can't get their lives together. Every couple of years, a funny video will show up either on YouTube or some kind of youth ministry thing or preaching thing where there's a family, they're arguing in the car about something, trying to get to the car, and they pull up to the church building, and immediately when they get out of the car, they're like, oh, hi, everything's fine. Okay, it's that kind of idea, that kind of where everything is not fine. Okay, you were just arguing in the car. And the fourth warning we get is don't forget to help others live the life that we are called to live. So we are all in this together, right? This life as a follower of Jesus. We're all walking with each other together. And we're not tying burdens up and putting them on people they can't carry. We're carrying burdens together. We're working on this together. And we know that maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe further down the road, our lives will look more like Jesus wants them to, but right now we've got progress to make, and we're all making this progress together. We're all moving at different speeds, but we're all trying to go together on this journey. And finally, we have to give people the tools they need to understand, and we have to use these tools ourselves. We can't keep these keys to ourselves. We have to help other people with them. Now, you don't have to be a Bible scholar, but we have lots of Bible studies that you can participate in to help understand the Word. We have lots of activities like that. There was a Bible study this morning on Psalms. If you've got 6th through 12th graders, I'm doing Acts. If you've got younger students, they're doing the minor prophets. There's a study on Wednesday nights. We have lots of tools for you to use to grow in your faith and understanding, and also that you can share with other people. This sermon, hopefully by Tuesday around lunchtime, will be posted on YouTube, and you can share it with them. If you don't like this sermon, you don't have to share it. You can share the other ones we've got. We've got a whole list of them. So those are the kind of the 5 warnings that I have for you. Now, before I go, you will notice I didn't get into a whole lot of specifics about what might be in the dirty cup as modern people, or what kind of keys we're withholding. And one of the reasons I did that is because I want us all to examine ourselves. Take some time and think, what are some things that I have, how are these warnings apply to me personally? Because I think a lot of times when we hear sermons like this, and a preacher starts going down a list, you're like, okay, I don't do that thing, I don't do that thing, I don't do that. I might do that thing a little bit, but in a whole lot. So I'm not going to do that. I want you to make your list. I want you to take some time this week and reflect, how do these woes, how do these warnings apply to me? And how do I change to be the kind of person that Jesus calls us to be? And like I said earlier, you are not in this alone. Every one of us in here is making changes and improvements in our lives so that we can be more like the people that God has called us to be. And rather than being like the Pharisees who went after Jesus to accuse him of things, we're going after Jesus because we are looking for salvation.